Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tree Actions, the Human Forestry Podcast. And all the way from the left coast, or you could consider it the best coast, or the wet coast, or the west coast. But not only that, from Vancouver Island, joining us today is Ryan Senechal. Did I pronounce that right, Ryan?
You did.
Perfect. And of course, with us always is Tony, and who heads up is our technical support team, but also a positive contributor to the podcast.
No, I just said I have the privileges. I edit out all the stupid things I say, but leave Dwayne's in. That's my job.
We laugh because we know it is true. So,
very true.
Well, Ryan, welcome to Tree Actions, and I'm really excited to have you on. I've been thinking about, how we first met and so on, and maybe we can get to some of that. But we always ask everyone how they found themselves in this human forest, how your journey in the human forest began, and whether it was professionally or maybe even for some people it began much before they even started working in the tree care industry. Some of the people began when they were kids in trees. So talk to us a little bit, or tell us about how you got started in the human forest to where your journey began, where your seed germinated.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. First of all, I guess my journey started as a second career. I wasn't born knowing I wanted to climb trees. I actually lived an interesting career before I found my way into arboriculture and since urban forestry. And that was through organizing events and as an athlete of sorts. I was pretty heavy into mountain bike trials and BMX, and I was sponsored for a full setup. Basically, I was on payroll doing events. I was traveling a good chunk of the year, 6 to 8 months a year, doing ramp shows across Canada and the US. Did a couple of trips overseas as well. And I was also, as I said, I was an organizer as well. So I was doing promoting for my own travels, booking shows all over, also working through another promoter and agent, but also doing like video work and photo stuff for magazines, and then organizing competitions, which was one of the connections that led me into the work I do now,
right,
in tree climbing competitions. But that started through the bike side. So I was doing trials events and really working on supporting the community of trials right from when I was 14 years old. I think I did my first event when I was 14, getting people together and supporting and, whatever they could contribute. I had one friend whose dad owned a trucking company. So, we were able to pick different sites all over the province in Ontario. I should say I'm originally from Bracebridge, Ontario, a couple hours north of Toronto. But he owned a trucking company, and so we're like, hey, can you help us get stuff here? And that's how it all started, is getting community together and everybody's, whatever they can contribute individually. Anyway, that's a long story. I was riding professionally from basically 15 till I was 24. And this is where it gets a little weird, spicy if you want. When I was about 24, I was living illegally in the U.S., overstayed my work visa, and was staying with a friend and doing like cash work, and didn't really have any plan other than like the way the pro riding scene works is it's very seasonal, so things dry up for the winter months.
Right.
So I was getting myself through the winter pretty much, riding out my savings from the summer. Ended up going back to Toronto to do an event in the winter months. Did the event, had a great time, came back to the border and got flagged for like a secondary interview. came in, and the border guard just basically completely called my bluff. He's like, provide me some proof of employment in Canada, and we're happy to let you through. I'm like, well, do people just, carry a pay stub around? And like, just anything. but that effectively was an abrupt ending to everything. Like all my stuff was in, outside of Madison, Wisconsin. And yeah, had to start from scratch. Basically, I was on a friend's couch that night in London, Ontario. Everything's upside down. So a day later, I'm on. I'd been living independent since I was 16 in Toronto, and the following day, I'm on my mom's couch, and it was kind of like, I would say that the writing thing is really volatile. Like, it's peaks and valleys. It's inconsistent work. It's probably, it has some similarities to the way people go about subcontracting and tree work to some extent. So a lot of invested effort, but it just got to be really exhausting and stressful, and wasn't super fun, to be honest, any longer. It had become work. So I was faced with this dilemma where everything came to an immediate halt. Didn't have a lot of money, and my dad actually said somebody had come into his place of work and said they were looking for people like right away, and that was at a golf course in Muskoka, and that was my connection to trees. I started in golf, and they sent me to chainsaw training right away. In Ontario, you have to have a chainsaw operator certificate. And then I was like, chainsaws are awesome. Like, ended up working through the winter months at the golf course doing selective clearing. And we were actually supporting a contract crew of arborists who would come through, and we'd do the ground felling, but they would do the climbing work. And I was like, holy smokes, like, you can climb trees as a career? That's ridiculous. And and for this time, this was 2004, I would say. This contractor that was doing the climbing work for the golf course, the two climbers were both women, which at that time in like Muskoka, that was pretty unusual, I would say, for the the dominant white male makeup, which persists in industry, but for that time, it was pretty unusual. And actually, there was one further connection where my coworker, who was probably parallel to my position, his partner was an arborist who had gone through Fleming College, and I was pretty immersed into the arb world, even though I wasn't directly connected into it. But I felt a sense of community within it and was really drawn to it. So I had a pretty quick trajectory from about 2004 working in golf to the point where I was full-time climbing trees, and started with a company in Fort Erie, Ontario. Just kind of put my profile on Arborist site. This is going back. I mean, a lot of people. This is just a website that had a forum, and I put a profile on it saying I wanted to get into climbing, and this company and this family-run business in Fort Erie gave me a shake. And it was a small outfit. It was actually two separate companies, but they were family and often worked together on stuff. But that was Brian and Katrina Van Osh, and Darren Cairns, and they were all like through the Fleming program, so had a really strong foundation. I was so lucky right from the get-go. Like with the golf course, they were very safety oriented. They wanted you training. I end up in this second spot where I'm finally doing full-time, like getting in climbing. They want me to go to college. They're all college graduates themselves, and working under the leadership of women in the process too. So I had I landed on my feet. In other words, coming out of a bad situation with bikes. Unfortunately, I still have a good connection with bikes, but now it's purely for fun.
Well, that's very interesting. I wasn't I shouldn't say obviously, but I've always known since I've known you that you've had this connection with bikes, which I think is really cool, by the way. And I've watched you grow into helping with the BC Opens and growing it into even something independent now. And we, it. I have no doubt, and I've always thought, well, his experience in the bike world and just the way you do things, the way the workshops you've organized. I even right as recent as the Soak and Loam workshop, where I've always been impressed how you garner from there, because it's an experience that very few people have, and that you can cross over, a BMX biking. I think it's BMX or motor. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but how you can translate the learnings from that into organizing events, and that you still do that and bring that to the artist world, because they're unique. You're unique in how you do that, and I've always thought that's pretty cool. What did you? You were quickly, enchanted by tree climbing. What was your first recollection of, like, rope and hitch and harness or saddle? What did you climb on in the beginning?
My first harness was Petzl Navajo.
Wow.
First rope, True Blue, Samson.
True Blue.
Split
Wow.
tail, Blake's hitch. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, well, so
Going back.
split tip was the Blake tip. Did you use True Blue for that as well?
That's a good question. I can't remember. I feel like it was either a 16 strand or a solid braid. But
yeah.
I was on the Blake's hitch like way too long. Unfortunately, my mentors, my early mentors, were not on INIs at that stage, so I didn't really have exposure of somebody that was right. On an INI tail. But eventually, I think the first competition I went to, a family friend of theirs was. I had mentioned I'm climbing on a Blake's, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, man. Like, let's get that resolved." That was the turning point.
Yeah. Well, hey, I mean, we've had quite a few guests on now, and most of them, that was the only choice they had. You're I think one of our first guests, where you're in a stage where you it's possible you could have, but you're still early enough that it's certainly Blake's hitch was very well used at that point. I mean, it still is. Let's face it, it's still probably the workhorse hitch out there. If you go to well over half of the working climbers, I think, probably still use a Blake's, believe it or not. But certainly not at the competitions and so on, of course. But when you think back to your decision to even try climbing, like, what was it that drew you to it in the first place? Like, was it a conversation? Was it just watching guys aloft? And then how would you describe your, whenever you think you want to do something, you do it, and then you actually do it and realize, holy shit, this is it, man. Like, how did that process go for you?
I think the connection deep down is like one of terrain and movement. Like in BMX and mountain bike trials, that's what it's all about. You just look at the environment and think creatively of the possibilities of movement in that space. And also seeing how other people are working with it, and the community part of it too. Like I recognized with that crew, with the two women that did all the climbing at the golf course, they were just like, they had this dynamic about them that was unfamiliar from any other workplace I'd been in, but it was very similar to the types of relationships I would have when I was working in bikes. Like, people like doing it. It's fun. And I could see that right away. And it was like the combination of all those things that really made it feel familiar and comfortable to me. Initially, it wasn't super accessible to me, I would say. Like, I could have been climbing much sooner, but didn't realize there was a pathway necessarily. Like, I was fairly comfortable in the golf course thing. Like I'm not a golfer. Like I'm not drawn to golf. It was more working outdoors and kind of getting a broad range of
Right.
skills that was more interesting to me. But like I could have been doing tree work full time, like right away, like right from the time I took that chainsaw operator certificate course. I was like, this is fun, and I really like the environment and people.
Interesting. So you really were transplanted, if you will. You found yourself in the BMX forest, and through a series of circumstances, you ended up having to, you were uprooted abruptly and had to find new soil, and you found it. You found connections, and it wasn't just, like I really like the way you articulated that the something that they had, like it was a spirit or a humanity connection, not just a fun or I want to climb a tree because it looks cool, but you actually liked what they had sort of energetically.
And again, that's not everywhere out there. I was fortunate to see the people I did early on, where that was allowed, really, because it can be quite hostile and like time and place too. But they just made it seem so fun and like a place I could imagine working 40 hours a week and not even blinking an eye. Like and it seemed like the learning curve too was a bit of a connection that was similar to BMX, where it's just you can see it's expansive and you can take it off in many different directions, but it's like this never-ending learning curve of growth, both in skills and knowledge, and that's attractive to me personally. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that is so cool. I never thought of that, but like how it makes perfect sense now listening to you say it. But how you look at a track or a piece of land that you're going to ride, and the possibilities. Now you with your background, you look at a climb like that. Like you look at a tree, and your route or the way you're going to move in it is like the way you would ride your bike on a course.
Yeah, there are elements within tree climbing that are much more utilitarian, I would say. Like there's the points of getting yourself established and the commute to your anchor point to the point where you're doing your work. But then moments will appear where it's like, oh, here's a creative opportunity. You see a line unfold, like when everything's lined up. Whereas I think BMX is you're constantly in that space. But still, those moments are just so satisfying, right? It's not something that can be obtained in most other workplaces. If you want to take it, I mean, not everybody's into that, but for me, it scratches an itch.
Yeah, that is really cool, and it's you're absolutely right. There's, what do you think about? Is that something that stays with people? Like I still feel that way, and I've been doing this a long time. And and I don't have to be necessarily climbing. There could be times when I'm teaching or when I'm felling or when I'm, whatever that work activity I'm doing. But there'll be, like you say, a line will appear, and a tact or a route or even sometimes it's just a moment to take in. It might be a scene or just a comment and to let it sink in, to let it percolate. Is that something that you think you have because of your chosen profession in the trees, or how is it that one can achieve that or experience that lifelong? Like what, and it sounds to me like you tapped into that and you still are.
Yeah, I think when you're embedded in a community that is like culturally embedded in, it sustains itself. When
Huh.
when you have less connection to that community, it requires you investing energy to make space for it. And the example I would draw on is in riding BMX now as a parent, with a young daughter, and work duties, and my career has kind of changed form a little bit, and it can be difficult to make space for fun. And the same in
Right.
climbing. Like you can get bogged down in the climbing workflow, and lose touch of that with maybe frustrations around retention of staff, that sort of thing, where you're just carrying a lot of mental load. You have to make you have to want it, and the returns are immediate, but like it's easier said than done, I guess. But where you do make space for that fun to occur, even if it's just a glimpse, even if it's just like, oh, I see, like the perfect like drop, swing, land situation that's just gonna make my day here. Where you make that space, it's an immediate stress relief. It's a therapy, right? And you can build on that little by little. So now, like riding BMX, it's a similar situation. Like the bike sits out there. There's long periods of time where I can't get at it, and potential dangers in leaving it for too long and jumping back on a little bit out of shape, which I learned the hard way in 2021. But you know, making that space and setting some limits on yourself, you can gradually get back into it, and it can contribute a lot of richness into your life in doing so.
Yes, I agree, and I like the way you put that. That you have to work at it or put energy into it. It like so many things. You get what you give, kind of thing, or it's very true. Um, how is that showing up for you? How do you do that? Like, how do you integrate that? Is it just does it happen organically, or can you share that's something that you do specifically to keep that energy flowing? And I know it's personal, but I'm curious. You're I'm finding very interesting.
I would approach it, I think, probably a couple different ways. Like one thing I believe in strongly is when opportunities arise, you take those opportunities. So if an old friend is coming to town, or if I'm going to a place where an old riding friend is, or climbing friends, even though it's like over programming myself in some cases, often
Right,
it's
right,
that is making the opportunities, or at least like showing up to the opportunities.
right.
The the climbing, or the socializing, or the riding is going to happen. I've always liked climbing and riding together more than alone. So I
Wow.
really try and foster the opportunities, and that's one of my selfish reasons for organizing BCTCC, the BC Tree Climbing Championships, up until 2018, and then doing these arborist workshop events is getting that
Yeah.
community together. And when they're all in the same room, the organic transfer of opportunities and exchanges occurs. But like there needs to be that venue and that day where people can be together, really. Some people are totally stoked to go out and ride alone and climb alone. That's just not me. Like it's more, I
Mhm.
thrive in those like social connections, but also the ability to do the thing we love in the process. So
Right.
that's, it does take energy invested in to set up the play date, and then it happens.
Um, I've been at events that you've run, and I haven't been to an event recently, but I know you're organizing basically independent arborist type uh, days. And what what uh, what is your how do you go about, coming up with the next idea for the next Ryan Arbor Day, the next Stoke and Loam or whatever? I know you give, and that's not, you're not going to get away without talking about Stoke and Loam a little bit, but what's next and how do you come up with what you're going to do? What's your inspiration?
So I've been following the same recipe that I've used since I was 14 years old when I started producing events. And I have to credit my mentors in organizing those events as well, just for how they approach things creatively and supported my earlier years where I didn't have the budgets or the means or the knowledge to do these things, just the enthusiasm. But really it's just taking an analytic view of the proceedings of the event, allowing yourself the space to stand back and watch how it unfolds, how people are, and through conversations with participants, seeing without directly asking, what do you like? What do you dislike? It's not like that survey approach, but it's just getting a sense of what's working and what's not working, and writing it down because time's going to go by between the next events. But also after that event, you'll hear sort of secondhand, people will still be talking about it in some capacity or through a friend, they'll bring something up that really stuck with them and hang on to that. I don't like doing the same thing over and over again. It's more take what worked really well, use that as the foundation, and then take it into some new creative space or idea. And full credit, a lot of people have been involved in sharing their thoughts on that. It's not I'm not the brain trust. I am committed to throw down all the pieces to make it happen. In most of these events, there have been others involved creatively that have helped make it magic. And it's kind of, people are here for a brief time contributing in that capacity, but just really leaning into their desire to share and be creative. And I can provide the resources to actually bring it into physical being. So that's what I bring to the table. I love the community, just that everybody has different contributions, and I guess I'm just an organizer and can actually, I have the connections and the knowledge and the will to just bring these into physical being.
I can't. I've been trying to figure out whether you're the tree, the root, the fungus, or the soil, or maybe a combination of all of it. But I mean, when you're talking about how you do this, it just reminds me so much of this analogy that I'm using, called the human forest. Because, I mean, literally, that's what you're connecting. You're building a human forest, and the connections that everyone has to make the organism what it is. The analogies are just endless in what you're saying. And I just do want to say about Stoke and Loam in particular, which was the most recent event that you had. When I first saw it, I think it was an Instagram post or something where I saw the name, I was like, what? And I couldn't help but smile. I'm thinking, there he goes again. Leave it to Senechal to pull out Stoke and Loam. You got to go just to find out what the heck it means, right? And I know I've asked you since how you came up with what it meant, and I think that's probably, from what I gathered from your answer, it even makes it more beautiful, because it doesn't sound like there was really that much to it. It was just a cool sounding name potentially, which it really is. And it was an event. It came and it went, but there's those that remember it, and it just makes the next one you're going to do that much more interesting to wait to see. I don't know how you're going to top that name, but I'm sure I'm not the only one, and maybe it's a private joke or a private thing, but how do you do that? Come up with these cool names and stuff like that is really neat.
Well, we approach every project, we being the creative elements, other members of the community that jump in and jump out. In the case of Soak and Loam, Ryan Murphy is a climber based in the Cumberland area, sort of near me on Vancouver Island. I think him and I were just bouncing ideas about. We knew we wanted to do something educationally, and trying to find a format that worked for most people. I'm all about accessibility and opening up opportunities for early career ARBs, but also I think people that traditionally might not attend the other offerings that happen to come through our area. So we were approaching this. That was our key priority. It's like accessibility for worker level to actually get exposure to the community, first of all, but also get some education out of it. That was the starting point, and then we're like, okay, we need a name. So this is the process, and that one, like the joke with Soak and Loam is the first rule of Soak and Loam is don't talk about Soak and Loam. But for some reason, everybody is quite taken by it, and I can promise you that it just came from a session where I think Ryan and I were hanging out, and it just fell off of my tongue. I don't know why. It happened.
Hey, and
both
that's
of us
good enough for
chuckled.
me.
Both of us were tickled with it. We're like, oh yeah, that sounds good.
Sometimes that's the best way. I think a lot of times it's the best way for things to occur, and that's what it's when you the first time I asked you about it, you was the same answer, and it's what makes it even better. It's just, hey man, it just kind of happened, and that's okay, and it's totally cool. And I hope you can always remember that. And you mean your whole career has been an example of that already, but it's really cool. Not everybody has the comfortability or maybe the willingness. I think maybe I don't know what the word is, but not everyone has the freedom to be that spontaneous or to just let something be what it is for the sake of the name, and that it has just a good cadence to it. Even like not everyone has that. What do you think about that? Do you think that, like, what is it about? And it seems to be more common in the arborists, in the arb world, that we're able to function in that. I don't know, Tony, what's the word I'm looking for here? Esoteric or nebulous, the field of existence, or
I might get you just to repeat the question, like as far as context. I'm not sure if I totally follow, and I want to get this one.
Yeah, well, thank you, and I appreciate that. I wish I could be more concise. I tend to drone on. What is it like? How is it that some of us, because I think I'm kind of like that, are okay? You come up with a name for an event, and it's quite spontaneous. It doesn't really have a meaning or an explanation per se, but yet it draws great, and that you're okay with moving forward with that. Like there's people that wouldn't be okay with, they need more structured parameters in order to move forward with something, not trusting a process, I guess. And what is it that allows you, what do you think makes you comfortable and capable of doing that, and that you actually enjoy about it?
I would say having a clear view of what is important in whatever project I'm involved in, and like what is most important with this, and like the name of the event it's never hurt us, I would say, in different names I've used in events over the years. But one thing I will say I have had success for is like just being weird with names, and unexpected, and like going back into the writing days, like that's all we did, and that like made you really stand out in the landscape, I guess. So I guess it is somewhat important. But people remember the names, and that stuck with me. So BC Tree Climbing Championship, that was named before it came over to my organizing, of course, but we also sort of attached like a name of that year's event from the years followed, and that I believe has stuck with the new organizers. They've been like BC, like one year we did like Coquitlam Conifer Classic, and we just have fun with it. But it makes it stand out. It makes it unique. It makes it memorable. So don't lose
100%.
sleep over it. But again, like lean on everybody involved, like creatively. I don't assign any pressure to myself to produce it, but often it ends up that's one thing I contribute.
I'm with you 100%. I think it's great, and speaking of the championships, I'd be remiss without talking about that. When you took that over, I mean, there again, I have to say, from my observation, your background came in and it flavored that whole event, because you guys didn't just run a TCC. And to my way of thinking, it was the first time when it really took on a new approach. Like, there were events, but were any of your events the same? I mean, you guys had some wild, wonderful events. Like, the people loved it. And maybe talk to us a little bit about that. Like, because I remember the one I think it was one of the first ones, the one in Victoria there in the park, where you had, the guys had to, pull themselves down to the end and then drag themselves back and stop midway. And then that work climb where you went part way. How did that work? Like, I remember there was you had to go do something part way up, go to the top, and then come down. You'll remember, but like, those events were all quite unique. I think the only event that was the same was the work climb. Maybe that even was modified. But just talk to us about that. Like, go ahead.
I should lay out the foundations for how we found ourselves in that place, because initially when Rupert Evans and I transitioned in the organizing role for BCTCC, right. BCTCC was operating as a regional qualifier for the Pacific Northwest chapter of the ISA in the ITCC format. And there were a couple of things that weren't working well for me. I don't want to get too critical here, but at that stage, there wasn't really any support or infrastructure in place. And it was just like through the contributions of the community that this thing even existed. So there wasn't access to any kind of budget. So I was, and I felt very trapped in the ITCC format, just in terms of like, you need specific trees, you need a specific group of experienced, knowledgeable volunteers. It's very demanding, and it also requires partners that have venues that can support that. And that was why a lot of events tend to just stay in one place every year. And that doesn't sit well with me. That was not what I came into this wanting to do. Like, when I started, my imagination was like, let's take this around the province. It's the BC championships. Like, let's not be static in one site. But then, like, you hit the situation head on, where you're having to build new relationships out with municipal foresters and try and work through their convoluted bureaucracies to actually get yourself situated on the site. And it's all off the side of my desk. Like, I'm at this point in time, I'm working for Bartlett. I'm a crew leader. I'm grinding it out, and then trying to do this like in my hours at home. So, and then to add to that, just these structural challenges in working through the ISA to get some budget and get the insurance requirements and get gear required. For those that don't know, the Pacific Northwest chapter of the ISA is, we've got the province of BC, we've got Alaska, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. So and probably a very similar staff and board structure to many chapters that are like in one state or one province. So it's a lot of resources to go around. So I understand why it was difficult to make any inroads there. So all of these structures and just being static in one situation over and over again led to this project really just transforming. So Ryan Murphy, who I mentioned previously, he had quite a bit of creative involvement at this stage, and we said, like, how can we do this different? Make it, sassy and draw people from the Pacific Northwest community, which, for those that don't know, there's a lot of movement. Like, it's a really tight community, despite being such a large chapter. People are really motivated to connect and very social here. So we wanted to distinguish ourselves on the map of many tree climbing competitions that were happening in the broader region, and just completely mixed it up. Like, let's look at what we have for surefire volunteers that are switched on, and the trees we have on a site that ticks these boxes. We need a site that's relatively accessible. It's got washrooms. It's got amenities. The trees aren't like a huge distance from parking, all that good stuff. So we start from that and then build out. It's like, now look at the trees. What do you imagine for this individual tree? Well, let's base an event off of this specific situation rather than coming in with the scenarios pre-cooked up and trying to force them on the trees.
Nice. And just walk us through the events of that. Well, that particular, was that the first one, Ryan? The one in Victoria? That was back in that was quite a while back there.
No.
Like the first one you did.
Rupert,
Okay.
First one I did was with Rupert in 2010, I want to say. First one I did solo was 2011, and then I did events every year from 2011 to 2018, all over the province.
So that year in Victoria, what was it? Do you remember what year that one was? Do you know the one I'm talking about? It was raining.
Yeah, I do. I believe that was 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
2017? No, there was one previous to that, Ryan.
Okay.
I'm sure. Well, maybe I'm mixing up. You know what? I may be mixing it up. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It was 2017. No, you're right. And that was where you gave one award to Rupert, and there was a couple others, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
Yeah. So
those events. Talk through those events, that particular one, just to give people an idea of how different it was.
Yeah. Well, going off memory here, because there's a couple I don't recall, but what would be the closest analog to an ITCC work climb was a large Gary oak deciduous tree that was, quite a nice climb. The way we set it up was anchors are pre-installed, similar to the work climb, but then we set up more stations than you can basically possibly hit in a time limit.
Right.
So kind of a race against time, but the bells were positioned all over. So the idea was, let's see if a line sort of takes shape that becomes popular and can get the most bells. And you did see that happening to some extent. I would have liked to put more effort into the planning of it to try and really drive a bit more creativity. But effectively, it's that. More stations. We disallowed handsaws. We just removed the whole industrial element of this and made it more of a pure sport type approach to the just climb the tree, get to the point, and see how many you can hit in the time frame. The other weird one we did at this particular event was a traverse situation where you have to install, like, time starts, you whip up a ladder to maybe like a 4 or 5 meter tension static line between, I think it was probably close to 25, 30 meter span between trees. Totally horizontal. So time starts, you whip up the ladder, lanyard in, build your traverse system, and then it's like a hand bomb horizontally all the way to the other point. And then
Yeah.
I'm trying to recall. I think at one point, like mid-span, like you mentioned, you
Yeah.
had to install a system basically to tension yourself sideways to hit a bell station, and then disconnect
Yeah.
that, hand bomb the rest of the way.
Yeah.
You could see people were just
Yeah.
cranking and running out of gas.
Yeah.
Because you're in this awkward
And it was a
position.
little
You're like,
slope. It was a little slope. Just so when you started, you could slide down, but you had to pull yourself back up.
Yeah.
And then there was a weird one too, where there was a kind of a speed event where they had to go up to midpoint and then up higher and then down. Do you remember? I can't remember exactly, but I remember it was really cool.
Yeah.
It was it was just kind of like an ascent type event. Anyways, it doesn't matter. We don't need, the point is, it was so different. And I don't think, well, I certainly hadn't seen one quite that different before. And I was, I wasn't so set in my ways that I would say this, what is this event? But I think, what do you think about, you think there's a future for that type of thing? Like, it hasn't been, COVID really slowed everything down, but maybe, I've always wondered if tree climbing events could take on a different shape and there could be more of that happening. Maybe this could serve as a way to inspire some people.
Yeah. My approach all the way along, like since I transitioned from the ISA, and this is not to knock on the ITCC events, I think there's like plenty going on as far as ITCC events in our neck of the woods. There's multiple regional qualifiers plus a chapter final event. So it was more like there's an opportunity here to do something fun and different. And that's more what I'm interested in organizing. And I do lend my support to the ongoing ITCC layout within the WISA as it sort of works into my schedule, and completely support that. But that's more like probably more competitive ultimately than we are, although people do get like right into it with the BCTCC events that we organized while I was involved. I think maybe the next step for me is I'm always like looking at access, and I feel like we're much more committed to the idea of sport and creativity, whereas like ITCC still had like elements of work that were strongly embedded in it. We distanced ourselves. Obviously, you're still getting primarily arborists out to these events, but it just allowed, like, we dropped some of the formalities and the scripts and all that, and opened up events to just allow people to approach the whole space a bit differently. I think moving forward, and I'm talking with an old friend and climbing colleague about what we're going to do next, and we're very, very early, but we're just like bouncing ideas. He's involved in like electronic music festivals, and more like art installation, lights, that sort of thing. And I'm like going in like still BMX mountain bike trials. Like, I'm most motivated by sort of a jam format where it can be somewhat competitive, but finding a different way rather than just purely time or quantity of bells, finding a different way, like, and some of the Red Bull events in climbing are already doing this, where it's more judged on a style rather than like achieve like a quantifiable task. So we're talking about maybe like more of a jam format where you just open up a space and new canvas, might be just a couple of stations, but the other thing is like, how do you get people involved at the ground floor? And that's what I'm always focused on, because ITCC had done that fairly well, but I feel like there's so much competition for space in the events now. It's primarily people that are already in it. So how do we get the next generation involved if they want to participate at that level, but also if they want to build community? And I need to do a better job of that. I haven't cracked that puzzle yet.
I've been thinking about that while you've been talking, and one thing I remember that I saw very clearly that I hadn't seen before when the BC Open started way back and when it first began. And it was part of Rupert. It was Rupert's passion around it in the beginning when he started that, and we threw a lot of support behind it. But what it was a way for people to not have to be afraid or intimidated to go to the big show. It was like a way to ease into. And I think that's kind of what you're touching on. And I still think that there's like, I don't, that what it grew into became less of that. It became a respected and a part of a qualifying event, which again it brought that intimidation factor back to it, which it in the beginning didn't have. And I think you're absolutely right for these people that want to get their feet wet or get started and don't want to go up against they just want to have more fun and learn and not be there in such a competitive sense. To provide an atmosphere for that, I think is really admirable and needed. And I wish you all the best and look forward to what you guys come up with. I wanted to.
Oh, sorry.
What? No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the angle I'm going to take in the next one is reducing the commitment. So we always load up like multiple stations and kind of force people through all of them. And right. I think the next one is just going to be like, here's the playground, and you fit into it over these couple of days, however you please. I think that's the next approach, and people, the community in general, will be able to, I think, ease the newbies into it in that space, rather than it's just the idea of having to make that commitment of multiple events over a day, and especially coming into it where you haven't ever seen one before. It's super intimidating, and I've seen enough people start the event and not make it all the way through and have a bit of a negative experience about it. So that's going to be, when I mentioned before, just the mechanics of building an event, it sort of starts at all the constraints and the lessons learned from previous events, right? And we build off of that. So those are the main things I'm thinking about right now.
Your competition tree and the ideas are growing and steadily changing as it ages, like all trees do. I wanted to capture a little bit, Ryan. You've touched on it so many times, but I'd like to just get a little bit into the space of the human forest. And we always do ask people this, how being part of the human forest or how working with trees, how that has, we've been talking a lot about as a career and it's impacted you, and you touched a lot about the softer side of things, the like how you sensed they really enjoyed their job, those two lady climbers in your first beginning impetus of your career. But if you could articulate to us how being part of the human forest and how trees specifically has affected you personally in your life as a father, as a husband, or as just a person. Is there a connection there that you could draw a parallel to trees in those relationships and friends and family?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is my wife would tease me for never being able to switch it off, just like always, like in some capacity. Talking with tree people or non-tree people about trees, and how people engage with trees. Like most of the work I do now seems to be more in that domain of I guess communicating. My area of research that I'm invested in is around worker retention and recruiting. And if there is a work shortage, and we think there is, what are the underlying structures feeding into that cycle? So I'm thinking big about how people existing now who have already had exposure to industry are experiencing positively or negatively the workplace, and also noting like how lucky I was to land in those different workplaces, time and place, and the people like Brian Saxon, Katrina Van Osh, Noah Violini, Rupert Evans, like all these people I ran into. Just I had a pretty soft landing and like a constant learning curve that was supported, but not everybody has that, right? And there's the environment has changed that workers are recruited into. There's different challenges in society now than even I came up with, and yourselves probably came up with. So it's a different reality and experience for them. And I spent a lot of time thinking about it, too much time. The other piece is like very local to me, and that is working to support people that are interested in shaping their community forest and participating in it, which also somewhat could support career opportunities forming, could support research opportunities forming. But there's still this disconnect between how your neighbors in your community see trees and want to support or not support policies, or could be simply funding for better outcomes for urban trees, urban forests at large. So trying to understand all the mechanics behind that is taking up a lot of my mental bandwidth through several different approaches. Like, and I think if I can share within my network of other professionals any sort of guidance, it's around think of the sustainability of what you're trying to do, and all the other pieces moving around you, and how to put energy into that so that when your effort maybe drops due to other demands in your life, like you have a newborn or other career change or anything like that, that your efforts are sustained somewhat. So I'm always looking at the landscape around me and the people in it, not directly at other arborists necessarily, but community associations, making connections with council is boring stuff, it sounds like, but then you realize in conversations maybe they have some perceptions that may not be informed just because they haven't had a conversation with somebody that has that perspective. And the same can be said for, like, we make all sorts of assumptions about other professionals around us, whether they're arborists or whether they're landscape architects or mechanics, doesn't matter. So I'm just thinking, like, whatever I'm trying to do, if I'm not bringing all these other pieces into place, like, one, I'm going to burn out, and two, my effort is like a snapshot in time. So I'm going to the community and your forest analogy. That's first observing, like, what are all the moving pieces here? What are all the systems at work, and trying to understand them. There's so much to know, and I feel like I know so little. And the more you focus on one area, of course, you lose other things to memory, and have to catch back up. And there's a lot of balls in the air, but like, I'm really drawn to just understanding the systems at work, and recognizing that I'm not. I have to watch my bias and try not to be too convinced or assured as well. But yeah, understanding the systems and trying to support them.
Yeah, when you're talking, it reminds me of, I can't remember where I heard it specifically, but it was along the lines of, when you're in any organization or anything you're a part of, if and when you leave due to whatever circumstance, but if there's a void or an absence when you're gone, you didn't complete your task, because part of your mission is to help someone or others be able to take, so that there isn't a void left when you leave. You've trained someone else to do your job before you move on to the next task, because otherwise you didn't really finish your job, or you didn't finish what you were meant to do there. And that's kind of what I'm hearing in what you're saying, or at least it reminded me of that. And it's basically a stewardship, right? Or a responsibility to create our responsibility in maintaining sustainability. Basically, I think one way
Absolutely.
of putting it.
Absolutely. I just gave a presentation to a bunch of Bartlett Tree experts, local office safety coordinators on this very subject about um, effectively as a working in safety and training as an arborist. There's a lot of weight on your shoulders, right? And often these are roles where you're asked to carry on with your work duties on top of it in production. And it's a lot of personal responsibility when you're working with complete newbies and trying to work them through the process to get them up to the speed where they're fairly competent and confident and safe and efficient and all that. But as a safety and training person, you've got like the record keeping side of it. You've got the inspections, the orientations, the paperwork, and anything you want to do that is like proactive. It's like there's hardly time for it, and the more time you invest into that, if it's not supported ultimately by supervisory and management level, that's an emotional hit for one, because you recognize it as having this potential. And so we talk through a lot of that sort of stuff. It's just like how to kind of take care of yourself through the process, but also build capital into making things happen. And the one thing I would say is, like, don't be afraid to make those mistakes. Like, that's pretty cliche, but like, invest that energy, see how it didn't produce anything and how you wasted a bunch of effort effectively. But ultimately, you're still going to gain something from that. And I definitely think back to my time where I was like burning the candle at three ends, doing safety and training stuff, and really invested in some proactive things and trying to persuade these ideas into implementation. Those skills made me much more persuasive in everything that came after, even if it wasn't implemented then and wasn't adopted in the culture. Like, just think of how hard it is for any one person invests into the culture of an organization that is even two employees, let alone 60 or 80. Think of like all the stars that need to be in line for your investment to change the culture, and it is adopted into just the practice, the day to day. That's such a hard thing, and we need to be more upfront about that. It's just like, we've got this idea that you're going to change the world. It can happen, but you got to learn all these other soft skills, as you mentioned, how to be more persuasive. But not only that, like, just being persuasive is dangerous, right? Like, you need to do the research and have a community to run your ideas and test it out with the user experience of the group, and dial it in, and then persuade it to the people that are the decision makers.
Tony, you're involved with the family business of a sizable business, not the magnitude of Bartlett, but certainly, you're involved in that. You've been listening to this, and we haven't heard a lot from you today, which is fine, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, and I imagine it must be intriguing you.
Yeah, I think, it's family business, but my older brother started it, but my father was an arborist, so second generation, but not through the family business. Just some people don't get that. But even from a very, early age, like my father came with forestry background into arboriculture. There was always, and much like Ryan, I was sort of put into the position of having good teachers. I didn't have to learn the hard way, but there was always that aspect of, at some point, it's going to be your job to teach somebody everything we taught you, and to pass that on. And that's something that I've seen recur in the arboricultural industry again and again. And I think it's something that kept me in the work for so long, and I think it's something that keeps a lot of people in the work so long. There's definitely that. I wouldn't even want to say it's as formal as like an apprenticeship program, because and a journeyman and that stuff. But there's definitely an aspect of passing on what was taught to you. And oftentimes those things aren't necessarily skills, right? Because when I think about, my career as a trainer, really the skills I teach most often are really pretty basic. Basic chainsaw use, basic climbing. Sure, you occasionally get the advanced rigging or, something like that, which is cool. But most of what you teach is really basic. But, the skills are basic, but it's that, how do you be a good worker? How do you get along with people on a job site where it can get very tense very quickly? The almost that sort of the subtle, the conflict resolution. When is the right time to step up and say, look, I'm going to take charge of this situation, and I'm not trying to be a dictator here, but we're going to do it my way, or something's going to go terribly wrong. And I think those are the skills that Ryan's speaking about that people haven't really tried to focus on. It just sort of happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that there's the gap now is it's just not happening quite as much. And I also see as a trainer, part of our job is to kind of keep the newer generation of people that are getting in the industry in contact with the past, right? So that they can understand that we started on a taunt line hitch and a Blake's hitch. Not that they would ever use it, right? And not that it's the best system out there, but you need to understand where you came from and have that connection to the past. And oftentimes I get so frustrated because these guys and girls come up with these great new ideas, and you're sitting there shaking your head, and I feel like a curmudgeon, but I'm like, we were down that road 20 years ago, like we traveled this road already, and I admire you for taking the step and wanting to do something new, but trust me, you don't want to go down that road. It's the classic rappelling off the rigging line, comes back around every 15 years or so. It's like, oh, you could save a ton of time if you just rappel down your pull lines. Like, yeah, we've tried that. It doesn't work so well. There's problems with that issue. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. There's, that stepping into that and seeing the other side of it and really trying to, replace yourself. I find now that, my best days of training and teaching somebody, I actually say less than I listen more than I speak sometimes. Because like I said, sometimes the skills I'm teaching are relatively basic.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get them going in the flow, then you could just sort of facilitate and sort of nudge them in the right direction, which is where I think
Yeah,
is the true value.
yeah, I totally. It's really interesting, right? I want to say I'm really impressed, or I admire, your passion around retention and what I'm hearing and learning, understanding. I think a little bit better now that it's about inspiration. For many years, and it's one of the reasons I got involved with training trainers. We have this saying that data doesn't matter, right? It's how you make people feel. And it's really bizarre because it isn't in the curriculum. But if you can impart or inspiration and inspire people to want to be different and enjoy, and that filtering through a group of people where it could have impact culture is just, it's a slow, rewarding process that requires patience, understanding, and dedication. And it's very fickle and can be very influenced by leadership or by someone in leadership that doesn't have the sensitivity to, I think really I guess if I was to use a word, I think that there's sometimes a disconnect between leadership and the people they lead is the humility, and humility in the sense that you are clearly aware and understand your own limitations and your own inadequacies or dysfunction. And when you know what you're capable of and your worst, you're that much better to be what you're capable of at your best. And you need to accept that you can be any one of those things at any time. And that especially applies to leaders. And when leaders exercise that and they're able to communicate that, and it's done through example, it's not really done in words, then you can start to see a culture shift. But it has to, and that I think is a real heart of training and education. Because any one of us, I think, if we think back to people that truly taught us, they gave us that, they imparted that somehow soulfully or energetically. And it had not as much to do with the fact that they showed us how to tie a knot or cut a notch. It was how they did it, and I think that's what you're touching on, Ryan. And I encourage you to keep in pursuit of that, because it's really, and wow, what a neat aspect to look at it from is retention, because if you can, you give, if people want to work there so bad they don't want to leave because of it's such a great place to work, then that's how you retain them. And that's a quite an order to recipe.
Yeah, in very simple terms, it's about the experience. That seems to be one of the underlying drivers. Of course, like even the most engaged person that has all the pieces in place, may end up leaving town or having a change of heart towards the trade, and I'd see the frustration on the part of owners, and where they're making these changes at the owner level, making the changes to improve the experience of existing personnel, and still seeing the turnover.
Right.
And I just gave a presentation on my research at the Ontario chapter ISA event in London this winter, and I remember one of the participants in the crowd in the Q&A said, "We're doing this, and this. It's still happening, and I've got nothing to show for it." And I just said, like, we're dealing with a wildfire, and you've got a 5-gallon bucket. Like, it's systemic, it's industry wide, it's embedded in the larger workplace culture, not specifically industry specific. So it's all of the things. And again, this like plays into my systems approach of observation and just trying to identify all the things that are at work against us here. What is not helping us is people continuing to make statements about what is wrong with the workplace, or with employees, or with an entire generation of people. That may be gratifying or satisfying in the moment, but it's not helping the situation. And the same can be said in people adapting their companies to remove the human element, or at least reduce their exposure to it, with machine replacement effectively. We're individualizing our capabilities, and that's going to gradually potentially reduce your opportunities to do creative work. You may get very commodified and focused into one particular thing. Fair enough if that's your approach, but I encourage any people in a position of decision-making authority with an organization just to look bigger picture and look at some of the industries that are showing leadership on the retention issue and how they're approaching it. But I spend a lot of time thinking it through, and again, like I need to build. I need to build that capacity and get more people invested in it. Right now, I think we're at the stage where we're still very much just frustrated by it, but we need to get organized now. And some regions where you've got some representation for industry are doing this. I think within Canada, Ontario, through the OCAA and the ISAO, they've been doing this for a long time. They get it. They've got a good foundation in place, yet they're still struggling with turnover, right? Case in point, I went through Humber College and was well situated within the workplace, and it ends up that I moved to Victoria. See you later, Ontario. So that's a regular thing. You invest all this energy into a future Ontario employee, and they take the training and away they go out west. And there's many more like me out here. So that's a deficiency within BC. They're not feeding into the pool very well. We don't have necessarily an established pathway or a well-established pathway through apprenticeship. But also you've got all these businesses of different sizes treating the formative experience for new arborists very differently. You'll hear owners say like, we would never send our staff to school because we've got a really strong in-house training program. But when you actually ask the workers, like, what's your experience? You can have vastly different experiences within the same workplace from different workers. So it's a difficult landscape from the worker perspective. It's just things to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, 100%. We always get about to this time frame, Ryan, and I think we're getting close to needing to break and wrap it up. Although we're not, and it's not immediate, but soon. But Tony, as Ryan's been talking, I know you often will ask a question about if he about a young person getting in the industry, what their advice would be, or something to that effect. You know what I mean? I'm curious what Ryan would have to say about that in response to your question and how you phrase it.
Yeah, it's, oftentimes, I look at like my career and coming through, but if you were to give advice to somebody starting in this work, like they're in your position, they're working at the golf course or whatever, and they see people climbing trees and they're like, oh yeah, that I think I could do that. What advice would you give them? How would you go about it if you could do it yet again?
That's a difficult one. I think so much of it is just chance, like who's hiring at the time. When people maybe approach me, there's been a few times where people have approached me through a connection, maybe outside of trees. They're just like, oh, I know this guy who knows about trees and might be able to steer you in the right direction. That's one thing I would really encourage. Like if you're thinking about making a start, and obviously I'm preaching to the converted through this crowd, but making yourself available to steer people in the right direction so they do land in the right place at the right time, where they've got a better shot at getting some thorough training, good mentoring, and possibly opportunities for an apprenticeship or at least qualifications, good equipment, steer them in the right direction. And I can think of and this speaks to the company side of things too, because I'm advocating for companies where I kind of keep tabs on them and I'm watching. I'm always watching. Like I'm keeping tabs with people I know that work there, and seeing what they're up to, because they're on my short list, right? And I want to make sure that when it doesn't matter who it is, I might not know them at all. I don't want to send them knowingly into a situation where the odds are they're not going to have a good introductory experience into industry, because we know what happens there. So make yourself available and steer people in that direction, and be forthcoming with companies and saying, hey, people ask me for work. Here's where I'm sending them, full stop, and here's why.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask you, Ryan. I agree 100%. And I mean, I would go through this when I was an instructor at the college. Who's your best student? What students got the best marks? Employees, potential employees would ask me, and I'd say, the guy with the best marks isn't always going to be the best employee or the best student, because I would always think about their attitude and their work ethic, and what I could observe in that. What is it that you look for? And I don't want to put you on the spot here, because this could get, obviously you don't want to get specific, and certainly not with companies, but, I know exactly what you mean, but I'm curious how you would articulate things about, like, say, I wouldn't recommend here and why, and I do recommend here and why? What are those things that you see and observe?
This is where I see a huge missed opportunity. There's currently a missed opportunity by industry and how it's responding to this, if you want to call it a crisis of retention and recruiting, is we have such a narrow view of what the winning formula is in a new recruit or somebody that has experience. Like, it's a recipe that works that we just try and repeat.
Right.
And even in how we mentor people, we're trying to repeat the the magic recipe. Drawing back to my BMX and mountain bike trials time, the richness within those communities is the difference. It's like people that are just competitive at the highest level, like that's a thing, but the bulk of the community is quite creative, and there's like a lot of diversity in it, just with stylistically, but in the environments where people are riding bikes, and that is the richness. And from there, I mean, 20 years ago, there was a certain recipe that worked as far as people that were getting full sponsorship, payroll, like, and print attention. It's evolved a great deal where people that you could call quite quirky, that have like a real avant-garde approach to how they ride, it just shakes up everything, and everybody's watching it and excited by it. And linking that to tree care, I think our product is so standard and generic across the landscape in the market, and there's like you're all competing for a particular type of client. There hasn't been much adventurous work going on to see how we could change our business to stand out in the market. I'm not going to get into the mechanics because that work is hard. It requires creativity, and I'm, you go do that work.
No, I get it.
But in doing that, you're going to attract a very different type of skills, especially if you're offering different opportunities within the day-to-day, and allow your business to unfurl creatively. That opens doors, and for people like me that are motivated by creativity, but have different strengths. Like, I'm not a big brawny dude that can slug out big beast removals and crane jobs all day every day. That's not my strength, right? So should I not thrive in the workplace? Should I not have a long career? And do I not have things to contribute? I would argue quite the contrary. So people are coming into the program that have unique skill sets that we're not identifying. We're just trying to repeat this cookie cutter person that has got our business to this point, right? That we think we need to be competitive with.
Yeah, the guys that, like, it's whoever brings in the most production, that's who gets promoted, and they end up in charge. And that's not like, that's one model that is based on revenue and speed and performance. That isn't necessarily, I think that's kind of what an example of what you're saying. And I look at the if that's the primary focus, and it can be pretty obvious that that's the focus of who gets to move into what capacity within an organization. If it's focused directly on production, let's say, for an example, there's a lot of risk and inherent, you're going to rule a lot of people out, and it may not be a place you want to encourage someone to go be part of. And unless you really know they're going to fit into that competitive dynamic environment. But it can go the other way too, where you see this often where there is no emphasis on any kind of performance, and then you get apathy, and I really appreciate what you're saying there about a balance between that and companies maybe having more of a multi-pronged approach to how they're doing their work and what a good employee looks like based on whatever it is they're doing. It's an interesting idea, and I think quite. You find it somehow, like, I think some companies do specialize. Like, they'll say, look, we're just not going to get into the bigger move. We're going to specialize on IPM, or we're going to do small tree pruning. And you see some diversity in that, but not in the bigger companies as much. It's interesting, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and the mechanics, like the logistics to actually pull that off, is quite a difficult thing. So it's easier for us to just shelve that and stick with the program than to face. And there are risks, of course. Like you got to keep the wheels turning and revenue coming in, and that's what you know. But if you have the means and the opportunities, like we need to start taking more of these opportunities, because other industries are on top of it. They know how to recruit. They know what makes people tick, and their voice stands out. Like we're not being heard right now, but we're also not giving a good introductory experience to the few people that are coming in. So we're screwing that up. If we're serious about addressing our issues, like you're no longer like getting the unicorns you think are out there. You're going to be disappointed with everyone that comes through the door.
Well, and it makes me think of about what you first talked about, that you were at witnessing a small company that had a couple women working for it, which was at the time quite rare, and still really is quite rare, but it's getting a little less so. But I find what you're talking about with retention and experience as a new employee particularly frustrating for women that I've talked to, that they face even greater challenges just by biasness. And I just something popped into my head. Maybe the diversity and healthiness of an organization may be judged by the amount, by the ratio of men to women involved in the field. Because having that diversity in personality and ability, strength and brawn versus dexterity and finesse, like I think that's kind of what you're talking about, and you're not alienating one or the other for any particular reason. It's been a real yeah.
I would say industry is doing a quite a good job at promoting to women now. I think the true test is going to be within a workplace, how many women are sticking it out for a year or 2 years. Getting past that like crucial 5-year mark, that's going to be the lagging indicator that we need to discuss, and that's drawing attention to issues that pre-existed women being targeted in recruiting. We didn't solve the conditions that we were experiencing the turnover with before, and now we're just targeting a new group to fill a gap, which is a problem, especially when you're not addressing behavioral issues within the organization. Management, supervisor, worker level doesn't matter, and that's continuation of a sour experience. And I've got possibly one of the key reasons I'm engaged in the work I am in now is because someone who I supported in coaching through their development, she shared some things with me about relationships, or negative relationships that occurred within the very workplace I was in at the time that drove her out forever. And her development was so sharp. She had so much to give. I thought she was going to have just an amazing future, and she got spit out very quickly. Very sour taste in her mouth about the whole experience. It still looks back fondly on parts of it, but like we need to be mindful, not just mindful, like we need to put in preventative measures to stop that from happening, because she would have had so much to contribute.
I agree, Ryan, and it's not it's a story that I've heard as well, and not only with women. There's been some amazing young men that that due to I don't know what specific circumstances, may not be the similar, but they were negative enough that they're not even part of the industry anymore and never will be, and that's just a damn shame, and something that I think if we're hearing about it at the amount that we have, it's probably a lot more prevalent than we think, and worth paying some attention to bring awareness and to help make a difference in that way. And I think you're onto something there. Tony, what do you think about that one?
Yeah, I think you make a great point, and that sort of a golden rule of being a educator, a trainer, facilitator, whatever you want to call it, is don't expect yourself from others. And I think a lot of companies, that's exactly what they do in their hiring process, right? They're like, a small company owner's like, okay, I got to get some more employees, and they start running around looking for themselves, and they're not going to find them, because they're just not there. So opening that perspective up, I think could, serve a lot of people. And then, like you said, when you do get that person in and, build to their strengths, not everybody's going to be the crane removals all day, every day, humping big wood down, I mean, one of the parts I've always loved about arboriculture was the variety of it. You have to have a little bit of change up. You have to have a wide skill set. But, at this point in my career, if I never cut another tree down, I'd be fine with it. I'll prune all day, like way more satisfying now. And there was a time in my career where like, oh yeah, just a big removal. This is going to be awesome. This is going to be a good challenge physically, mentally, but now I'm like, I'll prune dogwoods. Yep. All about them. I love those things. Azalea bushes. I'm good with them, but, and that, but yeah, to open that up and to not expect yourself from other people is good advice in general. And I think it's really good when you're looking to explain to recruit and to bring people into the industry and have them, get that positive, experience. I think some of it too, I've seen, because we've had those experiences here with the family company, bringing people. Some people come in a little bit disillusioned, right? Everybody wants to be an arborist when it's sunny and 70, and you're working on a beautiful white oak tree on the 15th green of a world famous, golf club. Nobody wants to be an arborist when it's snowy and rainy, sideways. And so some people come in and get a little disillusioned. There's some romanticism there, and they last a year or two, and then they kind of drift out or drift into other aspects of it that can be a little more seasonal.
I think there's a lot to be. I think there's a lot to be said though about the mood within a company on the bad days and how it's handled. That's a good temperature check of where the environment sits socially within your workplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, hard times don't build character, they show character, right? You shouldn't be building character on the shitty days. You're not going to build good. You're going to build shitty character, right? But it is a good, and to see that and to deal with that and to respond to that, to understand them. To go with the ebb and flow of it too, really. It's like I said, it just, I think the days of the oak men and the uke men, or yoke people and uke people, to be non-sexist about it, will always exist. That stereotype will always exist. But I think somewhere along the line, there's another, I don't know what the tree species is for it. I don't know what you'd call them, but I think somewhere along the line, there's something in between there. That is, I think companies need to start looking for and identifying to solve some of their recruitment and retention problems.
I think it's just embracing the diversity. We keep coming back to this human forest analogy, but a forest is full of understory, overstory, ground cover and underground connections that, of the fungus. Like, you think of the amount of organisms and the difference the strength of one is very different than the strength of another, and their function and their functionality and their purpose within the collective. We need to embrace, like, when you're looking for company owners, looking for people that are just like them, you're creating a mono stand, right? And it's not a sustainable model. And there's, embracing that diversity, and not only just embracing it, but actually seeing the benefit of it, that it's so vital. It's not a nice to have. It's not something to shoot for. It's the way to sustain. It's the way it always is. Even if you think you have a monostand, if you're actually surviving in this human forest, you have those diversities among you. You have to, or it doesn't work. So it's the whole resistance is futile. But embracing it just allows it to be that much for it to flourish rather than to struggle. Well, man, this has been a fascinating session, and I'm just really encouraged and really appreciate your thoughts and feedback and your time, Ryan, for sharing this with us. And I encourage you to listen to it yourself. It's weird saying it, but there's something about going back and listening to your own session. I've done it a few times, and I've been on other podcasts, and it's really cool. And yours will be coming out. Well, I'll just thank you for your time right now, and we can sign off. But Ryan, thank you very much.
Oh,
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And we do reserve the right to have guests on again and again and again.
Oh, nice.
So,
I'd be happy to come back.
When we run out of people to talk to, we'll just start going through the list again.
Yeah.
People stop talking to us.